And at the end of the day, it's the future profits that business is going to make. It really is that hard and cold, I'm afraid. It's all about the money. There are a couple of exceptions. I never understand why anybody buys a football club. But it has been known, and it usually costs the person who bought it a fortune. Another exception is when somebody buys something like a pub or a restaurant and they choose to buy a lifestyle business. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about people who want to buy your business, your practice, so that they can have a bigger practice, they can have a bigger business. Why do they want a bigger business? Because they want to make more money. So the reason for purchase is how much money the business is going to make. How much they're going to pay for your business depends upon how big the return is, but also how big the risk is. And part of working out what you can do with your business and with the value of your business is working out what are the risks and what are the likely rewards. The likely rewards can be estimated from the history. So if you've got a business that is making more sales every year and making more money every year, that's going to encourage a buyer to think that they can do the same thing. They can make more money, they can make more sales. If, on the other hand, your business is flatline, it's not growing, or even worse, it's declining, then you're in a situation where the prospective buyer is going to think the amount of return they can get is relatively low. So they're going to be worried about how much money they can invest in order to achieve their return. Because it is an investment. It's like any other investment. You don't go out and buy an expensive piece of kit if you don't think you're going to get a return from it. In the same way, you don't go out and buy a practice unless you think you're going to get a return from it. So it really is fundamentally about how much money the business is going to make when you're no longer there. It's brutal, but it's true, I'm afraid, and it's absolutely challenging all the way down the line. And it's not about the real risk, it's about the perceived risk. It's about the risk the buyer sees. So everything you do should be to minimize the perceived risk. You may well know that your customers never leave, your patients keep coming back year after year after year, but the buyer doesn't know that. And if you don't have a program, a way of communicating with your customers that keeps them on side and keeps them friends, the buyer will be worried that that might happen as soon as you go. So again, everything you need to do is everything you do is all about retaining the profitability of the business for the future, not for the past. The past is just a guide. And I know you've put your life's work into building this practice. You've sweated blood. You've done ridiculous hours. You know, you've gone above and beyond. But the buyer doesn't care about that. All they care about is that the result shows that you were successful in doing that. And that's a point that's very important as well. This becomes an incredibly emotional event when you decide you want to sell, or when you decide you want to hand over to the next generation. Actually, in some ways, that's even more challenging because you know who the next if you're handing over to a family member in particular, you know who the next generation is. But they're going to take control of the thing that you've built over the years, the business you have built that is your baby, that you've sweated blood and tears over, and you're going to let somebody else deal with it? Ooh, that's difficult, isn't it? Especially if you've been independent for 20 years, or for 30 years, or even 10 years. You've been an independent, you've never worked for anybody else, and suddenly you've got a boss. Because when you sell the business, you'll be required to stay with the business for a while, doing a handover. So getting the right mental approach to this is vitally important, because if you can't accept that somebody's going to come in and change things, then don't start the process, because it'll be painful for you and painful for them. You have to accept that things are going to change. And it is incredibly emotional. I have seen deals fall over at the last hurdle just because the two people who were involved in the transaction had an argument. I tell the story that on one Friday night many years ago, I had a phone call from the prospective buyer. They were due to meet up and sign all the paperwork on the Saturday. So it's Friday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were going to sign the paperwork on the Saturday. But the phone rang Friday afternoon, and it's my prospective buyer, and he is furious. He's shouting and screaming at me. He's absolutely spitting bullets and calling my client, the vendor, the seller, all kinds of names. And I eventually managed to calm him down a little bit and find out what was going on. He said, well, we were talking about what we were going to do on Monday morning, how we're going to tell the team what's going to happen and who's going to do what in the business after the acquisition. And then the bugger hung up on me. Well, I managed to calm him down a bit, and I promised to go and find out what was going on. But before I could do anything, I put the phone down, and it rang again. And this time, it's my client. And my client is now swearing and screaming at me. That's so-and-so, Mark. He hung up on me. Mark had been on a mobile phone, and the mobile phone had lost the signal in the middle of the conversation. Each side blamed the other side for it, and the deal fell apart. It took 3 months to put that deal back together again because they didn't trust each other anymore. So I can't tell you how important the emotional piece of this game is. It's absolutely vital that you get yourself in the right mindset. And when you come to sell, if you want to sell, you will only do a deal with somebody you like. It's not about the money. And if you don't like them, you will find a reason not to do the deal. So don't underestimate how important that piece is, because you won't do a deal with somebody you don't like. I absolutely promise you that. Finding the right buyer is a challenge. The right buyer is somebody who really, really wants what you do. Somebody who will take what you do, add it to what they do, and make even more money as a result. The wrong buyer is somebody who already does exactly the same thing you do to exactly the same clients or exactly the same prospects. So the wrong buyer is probably your immediate competitor. Because what's the real value there? All they're going to do is save some cost. It's not a real opportunity for them to grow dramatically. They're just going to save some money along the way, strip out some costs. And that is pretty horrible as well for your team. If you've got a team around you and you sell to the local competitor, then the chances are they're going to get rid of that team because they don't need them all. So if you want to look after your team, you've got to find the right buyer from that perspective as well. And that probably means somebody who's moving into the area from a different area, somebody who deals with perhaps a slightly different range of products and services to what you offer. Somebody for whom there is a real benefit and a real overlap. In the perfect world, it's somebody who can sell what they do to your clients or your patients and sell what you do to their patients. So you get that synergy. The perfect buyer is somebody for whom the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. When they put the two businesses together, they don't just get the value of the two businesses, they get a bit more as well. They get an extra benefit. The whole process from when you say, I want to sell, to when you actually get to leave the business is probably 2 years. It'll take the best part of a year to actually do a transaction. From when you say, I want to sell, to when you've actually signed the business over, will take about a year. But in any owner-managed business, you should expect that you will be required to work with the new owners for a year post the transaction. Now that won't be full-time. It'll be full-time to begin with. It'll be pretty intense to begin with, but it will reduce over time. Typically, you'll find the first 3 months post the transaction are pretty much full-time. The next 3 months are probably half-time, and then you're down to a day a week, and by the end of the year, you should be down to just a phone call. It may also be that there's some element of the purchase price that is attached to your continuing involvement, because they want to make sure the business survives and thrives under their ownership, and anything you can do to make that happen, they will want to make sure that you put your best efforts into it. So 2 years is your time frame from when you say, I really want to sell, to when you actually can go and sit on a beach, if that's your ambition. But coming back to what makes a business worth more money, what makes a business worth less money, let's call them value drivers, things that make the business worth more. Value drainers are things that need fixing or will cost the prospective buyer some time and some effort and some money. Value drivers, well, there are any number of these, but let me hit a few of them for you. I've talked very briefly about management and succession planning. If your business is you and there isn't anybody else in it, that's a really tough business to sell. If your business is you and you've got a team, but they're all going to retire at the same sort of time, that's not terribly attractive either. Position you want to be in is a business where, yes, you're important to it, but you have other people who can run the business when you're not there, and you've got a range of ages. Some people who are relatively young, starting out on their careers, some people who are somewhere in the middle, and some people who are a little bit older. But the kind of business where you can actually go on holiday for a couple of weeks and the business carries on functioning, that's a business you can sell, probably. The business where you go on holiday and you shut the doors and nobody gets seen, that's much more difficult. Now you can change it. It takes a couple of years. You can bring people in and you can bring them up, but it is an investment that you should make if you want to be able to sell your business. In a similar way, if your role is so central to the business that nothing else happens when you're not there, that's terribly difficult to sell. But if your role is one of being a general manager,
I'm in a webinar about practice.
If your role is one of general manager or managing director of the practice, that's different. You can do that and you can be part of it. But if you are the sole operator, as I said earlier, then that's much more difficult. And two similar companies can have very, very different values, depending upon what the underlying support system is. I recently did 2 clients, similar sort of size businesses. The valuation difference between them, although they make fairly similar amounts of money, the valuation difference between them was a multiple of 5. One of them is saleable and the other one is not. One of them has the support structures, the other one doesn't. So this is very important to think about it as the future of the business rather than the past. The past is only a guide to the future. One of the things you might want to look at across your businesses is what demographic are you dealing with? Are your patients all the same age? Are they all going to retire or disappear at the same time? Or do you deal with a wide range of ages? Are you serving all of the marketplace or just one sector? If you're only serving one sector and you're only serving, let's say, the older families, the older people in your area, your town, then you're going to be less attractive, because that by definition says you've got a shorter time frame for that business to continue to operate. Do you have a customer retention program? Do you have a way of making sure your customers stay with you? Do you stay in communication with them? How well is your business going to cope when somebody opens another practice, 3 doors down the road? Are you equipped for that? If you're not equipped for it, then why would somebody buy you rather than opening their own practice just down the road? It might be cheaper for them to open their own practice rather than come along and buy you. But if you're secure and you're doing a good job and you're looking after all your patients and your patients stay with you, and you've got marketing programs to acquire new patients and keep the patients that you've already got, I'm going to look at you and think, actually, it would be very difficult to get into that market because they're doing such a good job. It's really hard work for me to get there. And as I said earlier, if it's a matter of handing on to the next generation, all of this stuff is good stuff. It's all stuff you ought to do anyway. You really ought to have these policies and procedures and processes in place. Many businesses have some form of quality system. They have some form of ISO system involved in them. And I suspect that many of you wouldn't have that. Why would you? But if you did, you'd know that within a quality system, the idea is that you have a set of rules and a set of processes that can be performed by anybody who is suitably skilled. So you take away that tribal knowledge. You take away that, oh, this is how we do it around here stuff, because it's written down. So if you're going to do anything to change your business, start documenting what it is that you actually do. Start writing down the stuff that you do. And I'm not talking about in your clinical practice. I'm talking about the stuff you do from an administration point of view and the stuff you do from a marketing perspective. Document it so that when somebody else comes in, they can pick up the piece of paper and go and do it. That's where you want to get to. You want to be able to say, okay, my receptionist has left, but here's the receptionist procedure. I can hire somebody else and they'll be up to speed in no time. Or my marketing agency have gone. I've fired my marketing agency, but I've got a process. So my marketing agency, my new marketing agency can step in and run the process for me. The whole thing is about being process-driven rather than being people-driven. If your business is reliant upon individuals, it's incredibly difficult to sell. If your business is reliant upon processes and procedures where you can put individuals in to follow them, that's another different game. Be careful with property issues. It's often not advisable for your business to own property. It's much better for the business to be leasing a property on relatively short-term leases, certainly with break clauses. If you do own a property, one of the things you might want to think about doing, through the business I mean, if you do own a property through the business, what you might want to think about doing is putting that into your pension scheme and leasing it back to the business. That gives the buyer flexibility. Yes, you still get the income from the property, but the buyer doesn't have to fund the purchase of the property. That's a good starting point. And secondly, you've got an income, you've got a reward for the business you've built sitting in your pension scheme. But be careful about buying non-business assets through your business. There's a set of rules called entrepreneurs relief that you may have heard of that apply to owners who are selling their trading businesses. It does not apply to people who are selling investment businesses. And the difference between the two is undefined, shall we say. It's a matter of judgment. But if you own a whole load of property through your trade company, you will be an investment business. If you own a whole load of stocks and shares through your trading company, you will be an investment business and you won't get entrepreneurs relief for that. So make sure that you have only got trading assets in your trading business that you want to sell, because that way you'll get the entrepreneurs relief, and that's 10% tax rate when you come to sell. In the same way, if your business has cash surpluses and you take, I'm assuming you're a limited company, has cash surpluses and you take a dividend from the company at the end of the year, don't do that in the year running up to sale, because the buyer will buy that cash pound for pound. And it'll be part of the consideration for the purchase, and you'll get the 10% tax break. Whereas if you take the dividend out, you'll pay your marginal rate of tax, as always, as you usually do. So you've got an opportunity to save some money there. It can be incredibly valuable to have the latest established technology in place. I mentioned earlier on that you've got to have processes and procedures. If those processes and procedures are technology driven, then you've got much more of a chance that somebody will come in and look at that technology and go, yes, I understand how that works, I can operate that, rather than inventing your own systems, your own processes. Much better if you've got a framework there that somebody else can pick up and manage. As you can imagine, there's an awful lot involved in doing this from beginning to end. There's a short survey that John has already mentioned, and it's a bit of fun more than anything else, but it'll give you an idea of some of the things that you might want to consider. So I'd encourage you to complete that. I'd obviously encourage you to get a copy of my book because it's brilliant. It would be. But I think the overall message for you is that, remember, the only reason somebody is going to buy your business is because they want the future profits from it. And it's a different mindset when you start thinking about it that way. When you go back to that core principle, the only reason they're going to buy the business is for the money it's going to make them. It makes you stop and think about what you're actually doing. So I hope that's helpful. Is that long enough, John?
That's absolutely wonderful, Tim. As I say, if you want to take a few more minutes, that's fine. But perhaps what we could do is maybe open up to some questions, because obviously that's a very important part of these webinars. So absolutely. What I'll ask everybody to do is, if you know how to use the hand on your system, please use it. But I am going to unmute everybody because I do appreciate some people are coming onto the webinar for the first time and might not be too familiar with it. So everybody's now unmuted. So could you perhaps put your hand, rather than everybody shouting out, could you put your hand up if you're on the video, and let me know if you have any questions for Tim. Anybody have a question? If you're not on video, please speak. Surely people have got questions. Right.
Leslie's got a hand up.
Leslie, I've found your first hand. Yes, please go ahead, Leslie.
Hi there. Thanks very much for sharing that with us. We're a limited company, and I own the property of one of the practices that I have. I have two practices. And you mentioned about putting that into pension if that's possible.
Yep.
My understanding was because I already owned the property that I wasn't able to put it into my personal pension. Any comments on that?
I'm sorry, Leslie, did you say you're a limited company?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, Tim, just before you answer, I'm going to put everybody on mute because there's some background noise, and then I'll unmute you if I can. So just give me 2 seconds, and I'll just do that. Okay, Tim, you can now speak.
Okay. Leslie, I'm not sure quite what your situation is there. It sounds as though it's more of a tax question than anything else. I don't understand why, if the company owns a property, you shouldn't be able to move that into your personal pension. There's no reason for that to happen, for that not to happen. If you personally own the property, that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not part of the company. It's not part of the sale. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. I've unmuted everybody again. Has anybody else got a question? Angela, is your hand up, or is it just on your face? I'm not sure. Have you got a question, Angela? No.
Yeah.
Okay, Angela, just before you start, I'm going to mute everybody and unmute you if that's okay. Please just bear with me a second. I think there's too much background noise. Once I get to your... Okay, Angela, off you go.
Hi, just going back to the values. We went through some value drivers. Were there any other negative things that we should avoid?
Okay, just muting everybody, and then Tim, give me 2 seconds. Okay, Tim, off you go.
The list is as long as your arm. Sorry, it's almost every feature of the business. It starts with the owner's role, but things like employment contracts, not having up-to-date employment contracts, things like having, again, in the people issues, if you've had some employment disputes in the past, they're a negative. If you've had tax investigations in the past, they're a negative. But apart from the owner's role, the biggest one is if the business is showing declining sales or declining sales and profits. That's the one where the investor, the person buying the business, is going to hesitate and think twice about making that investment. You want to be showing growing sales and growing profits year on year. Over the last 3 years when you come to the sale, the buyer will look most closely at the most recent year, and they'll look back at least a couple of years. They may look back more than that, but they'll look back at least a couple of years. So you want to be showing a business that's growing, not one that's declining, if you want to get maximum value. If the business is going the other way, if it's shrinking, if you are losing customers, you're losing revenues, then that's a really big negative for the potential buyer. It's all about the future profits. And if your trend line is pointing down, your graph does that, then the prospective buyer is going to put relatively little value on the business, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, you're next. Your hand's up, Cheryl. Are you there, Cheryl?
Ralph has his hand up.
Yeah, I'll go to Ralph. Sorry, Cheryl did have her hand up. Okay, Ralph, off you go.
Well, back to the property issue. We have a number of directors. Can you divest the properties into various pension schemes?
Yes, you can. The simplest thing to do there is to have a group pension scheme that is shared by the directors, and you can create that relatively easily. There's a kind of pension scheme, I think it still exists, called a SAS, which is a self-administered small scheme, and you can put the property into that, and then it's outside the business, and you can decide what the division is between you there.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to ask Cheryl again, whose hand is still up. Cheryl, are you with us? Maybe she's got her voice on mute. I apologize. Is there anybody else with a question? I'm just looking around for hands. No hands up on the screens, except Cheryl, so I can't contact. If you can't use your hand, just speak, because
Ralph is back again.
Is that another question, Ralph? Let me just...
Yeah, I don't want to hog the questions, but you mentioned marketing companies as if we'd all be using them. We don't. We're just ad hoc and word of mouth. Is that? But we're that busy, you see. So our rationale is if we start marketing, we won't know what to do with it. Should we take on a marketing company? Because I had a very convincing spiel, at a recent conference about how good it would be for us, and I met other people who invest a lot in them. Should we be investing? I
think the answer to that is yes. You may well be doing incredibly well organically through word of mouth. That's fantastic. But is it repeatable for the new owner? So the new owner will actually business without relying upon the personalities and the existing reputation of the practice, because they can't necessarily pick that piece up. They're not Ralph. They may not come to Ralph's. The buyers may not come to Ralph's practice, but the prospects may not come to Ralph's practice if Ralph isn't there. So you can't rely just upon what's happened organically. You really do need to have processes in place, and you don't have to spend a fortune and do an awful lot of work on this. If you're busy, that's great, because that's where you want to be, busy and growing. But if it means you need to bring on another practitioner, then do so, and feed them with the marketing. That's what it's about.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, can I ask a question? My name is Martin Golden.
Martin, can I just ask you to hold on 1 second? I'm going to mute everybody and unmute you. Just find you, Martin. Okay, off you go, Martin.
Yeah. Now, Tim, would you advise getting a kind of professional valuation of the practice? Because we're looking. Our sort of time frame is kind of a planned retirement for me in a few years' time. So we're looking ahead for that, and we felt that without a kind of professional valuation, we were kind of stabbing in the dark, really. And how valuable would you say those professional valuations are? Hello?
Mute me, John. Thank you.
Sorry, apologies.
Martin, it's almost how long's a piece of string.
Right.
You can go to a firm of accountants and they'll give you a valuation. It's probably pretty meaningless because they're not going to take into account all the factors that we talked about, or I've talked about now. They're not going to take into account the value drivers, the value drainers, the good stuff, the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't a sales pitch, but let me tell you how we deal with this. We have a process where we will come in and do a valuation and assessment now in the current.
Sorry, what company do you? I missed the start of the webinar. Which company do you work for?
It's called KLO Partners, and I'm the L in KLO Partners.
Right. Okay.
There's three of us. But we have a defined process that allows us to assess your business as it is now. It gives you a valuation, but more importantly, it tells you why. It gives you the value drivers and the value drainers.
Yeah.
From that, you can determine how much you want for the business, and what's the gap.
Yeah.
What's the plan you need to execute to get to the money you want to retire on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Just scanning the screen, can't see any more hands. We've got we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left available if I want to try and stick to time today. So please, great opportunity to ask Tim any questions. If anybody wants more details about Tim and his company, then please contact me and I'll pass that all on to you. And Tim mentioned that he sent out a seminar, which if you could fill in, I think it would be a good opportunity. And he's going to be giving some free copies of his book if you're the lucky one to be picked out, having completed that survey. I'm just seeing, I've got a chat here to check who wanted to speak.
I've got one more thing, John, that might be useful for people.
Please go ahead,
that's talking about the situation where you want to hand over to a member of your team. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's somebody who works for you. What would be known as a management buyout, where somebody wants to step up. A couple of things about that. First of all, the chances are that the person who works for you doesn't have enough money to be able to buy you. If they did, they wouldn't be working for you. So you've got to recognize that if you go down that road, yes, you'll hand over the practice, but you're going to have to help them fund it, which means you're going to have to take your money out over time rather than immediately, and you're going to get less money overall. It's an uncomfortable truth, but that's really what it is. It's not easy to face that one. The person who works for you wants to buy your business, but they can't afford it. You're going to have to help them. You're going to have to provide what's called vendor financing. In other words, you lend them the money and they pay you back over time. There's also a fairly big risk with that. If they make an approach or you make an approach to them and it all goes pear-shaped, can you continue to work together? Do you have a backup plan? You've got to be very, very careful about it. And I would suggest that you have a mediator organizing that for you, working with you to make that happen. Because as I said earlier on, this is an incredibly emotional event. It's your life's work. It's your passion. You've spent years doing this, and you probably like the person who's potentially going to buy the business from you. You don't want to fall out with them. It's like walking on eggshells. It's really dangerous, but it is possible to do it, and it's possible for it to be successful. And they can borrow some money as well. Banks quite like management buyouts. They're quite keen to lend money around that area, but they won't lend enough. Not for you to be able to get the value that you get from a third party.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. If any of you attending this evening feel that it would be valuable to run a more comprehensive workshop on this area, please do get in touch. Let me know, either by the forum or contacting me directly. Because what I want to do is I want to try and set up workshops and meetings where I feel there's a demand. I think setting meetings up when I don't really know what the demand is not the right way to go about this. But I do know this is an important area. But let me know, and then I can start to work on the areas that you're interested in. And as I say, it could well work if get Tim involved following his excellent talk this evening. And before I thank Tim, I just want you to put into your diaries, our next webinar will be on Thursday, May the 11th, and some communication will come out shortly, but I know it's difficult to make sure everybody's aware of it. That's Thursday, May the 11th, and that will be on, we're going to have a slightly different webinar. David Mack is going to be supporting this webinar, and we're going to be talking to some of the SightCare members who've actually been engaging in our business development and business support courses. And I thought it'd be a good idea to listen to their experiences, what they've gained from it, how they've grown their business, and to ask any questions that members who might be looking for that support can benefit. So that'll be on Thursday, May the 11th. As I say, do please complete the survey, and if you want more details about Tim, let me know and I'll send them out to you. I'll be putting, this has been recorded, so if you do want to listen to it again, and there's any area that you didn't quite pick up on, probably by, hopefully tomorrow, we'll have it on YouTube. And you just need to go onto the SightCare YouTube and you'll be able to see Tim's webinar and you can listen to it again. I'd just like to finish off by thanking Tim tremendously for the webinar this evening. I think it's been absolutely wonderful. You can see Tim is a very, very professional speaker. He's conducted it with a tremendous calm and succinctness, and I want to thank Tim for that. And of course, thank you all for joining us this evening. If you thought the webinar was good and you benefited from it, please go on to the SightCare forum and let everybody else know. We had 28 people on tonight's webinar, which is great. But of course, we've got just under 400 practices in SightCare, so there's room for a lot more to benefit from it. Tim, thank you once again, and thank you everybody else, and we'll end the meeting there. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.